Learn how you can save time and tuition dollars with Wilmington University's new Dual Credit Advantage. Go to wilmu.edu/dual credit. Glad you could join us on a Sixers Talk podcast brought to you by Wilmington University. WilmU Works. Danny Pommells and Ben Berry here with instant reaction to Game 6 as the Sixers go down 99-90. The season is over. And I say glad you could be with us because we need this podcast to kind of heal a little bit, to experience some cathartic moments as the Sixers have a lackluster effort. A bunch of things went wrong in this game. It probably started when Danny Green almost had his leg broken by Joel Embiid falling on it. It was hard to watch. You felt the same way about that, Ben, when that happened?
So that was one of those incidents where I didn't get to see it live. I saw the replay, which might have been worse.
Right, because they slow it down, right?
Yeah, they slow it down. So I'm glad I wasn't eating so I saw it once, then I looked away. That was more than enough for me. I'm not someone that goes back to watch some of these injuries. I hope for his sake, nothing with the team or my interest as a fan, I hope he's okay. But, yeah, it was not easy to watch whatsoever.
Yeah, it was not easy to watch Danny Green get injured in that way, and it wasn't easy to watch
before you keep going, for what it's worth, he was on the sideline at the end of the game.
He was on the sideline in crutches, and reportedly he needs to have a further testing and them looking deeper with some type of X-ray, MRI, or what have you to try to get a full idea of exactly how injured he is. But he won't have to play anymore this season. We know that because the Sixers have been eliminated from the playoffs. Their season ends at home for the second year in a row. Historically, they've only been past the second round once since 1985, and that was in 2001 with Allen Iverson and the crew. So it's been almost 40 years, bro. Almost 40 years in total that they've been past the second round. They've been past the second round once in 40 years, almost 40 years. So,
and it doesn't help that today was the anniversary of the shot,
Kawhi shot. Yeah.
So.
And you know what? I don't even think it matters overall that the season ended here at home again. I don't think it matters as much that it ended in the second round. I think the issue is the effort that the Sixers gave in this elimination game and the way they performed, particularly in the second half. They were down 1 at halftime. You know, they have fought their way back and had established, a little bit of momentum going into that third and fourth quarter, but they just did not have the desire to win that you would think a team facing elimination would, and they hadn't been good at home all season. And by meaning not good as in not as good as they had been in years past where South Philly had been a fortress for them. So this fan base had seen them lose a lot at home, more than in years past. And man, there's a lot of places you could start. Joel Embiid obviously banged up and him falling on the ground a bunch of times in this game, and one of them falling on Danny Green's leg in the early going. But James Harden, man, goes the entire second half with 0 points. He has 11 for the game. He, by my estimation, shot twice in the second half.
You're right. Correct. That's correct.
By my estimation, he had 2 shots in the entire second half. And, some people might say, as your point guard goes, so your team goes. Like, he is the floor general out there. And when he's just not, giving it that aggressive, 16-point fourth quarter, 31-point outburst type of effort that we saw in game 4, the team kind of is sleepwalking. The team is also dragging a bit. So I'm not going to lay everything at Harden's feet, but just not the type of performance you expect from your other superstar. Like, you are the other superstar, but yet you're playing, like the Monstars took all your powers. You know what I'm saying? So I don't know if he, I don't know what happened in the locker room at halftime, but he came out and was just just not himself, and the Sixers suffer for it.
Well, I'm going to rebuttal you there for a second. I can't even say he wasn't himself because outside of game 4, where he
This
scored
is what we've
16
come to
points in
expect.
the second half, he hasn't scored double digits in any second half in this series. Only game 4 where he's dropped 16 in the second half. He shot 2 shots in the second half today. He hasn't scored. Yeah, it's been putrid. It's been bad for James Harden. And we all just said, be efficient, be happy, be aggressive. That's what the Sixers fans wanted. That's what we wanted. That's what we expected out of him. And it makes you sick to the gut because he was brought in here to make it easy, take the load off Embiid, be able to create shots from the perimeter, get others involved, and someone that can go get a bucket when the Sixers needed it. They traded Ben Simmons, and I hate to bring his name up. They traded Ben Simmons, a guy who wouldn't shoot, for who they thought they were getting, a former MVP, a guy who would shoot, who turns out to be a guy that wouldn't shoot when the Sixers needed. And it just, the whole effort, and you mentioned the effort earlier, was unacceptable for a lot of the players, for all of them outside of Maxey and Shake in the second half. But right now, we're talking about James Harden, that was completely unacceptable. And it just makes you wonder, like, what if that's all he's going to be? The Sixers didn't get any better.
Wow. It turns out they traded Ben Simmons for a guy who wouldn't shoot when they needed it. Wow. That is a profound statement because that's really what it boiled down to. And, it's easy to say that he doesn't have it anymore. It's easy to say that he's not what he was. But when he goes out and proves you right by having performances like this and, going, 0 for 2 for the entire second half in an elimination game. And, it's difficult because you have Harden, who's supposedly fully healthy, having this type of performance where you got Joel Embiid playing with a torn ligament and a fractured orbital bone and, not quite himself out there to, concussion or whatnot. So it's like a dichotomy there because you got Joel giving every last drop of what he has, even though he's not quite himself, where Harden isn't quite himself and won't, shoot his way out of it or figure a way out of it. And I think he has some good moments, but to put it all together and think about, what they needed from him and what they got, you're frustrated, and that's all that's left for you to feel. And I hate that, you know, part of the reason Tyrese Maxey doesn't go full bore all the time is he's deferring a bit to these veteran players, but it turns out that he's deferring to guys that can't do what the team expects of them. So it would have been better served if Maxey hunted his own shots and was more aggressive and was getting after it more. It's moments when I feel like he has the ball, and particularly in the first half, where if he just puts it on the floor and goes into one of his moves, he's going to blow by Max Strus or Gabe Vincent or Jimmy Butler or whoever's out there, or at least, draw another player so maybe he can kick to another guy. But instead, he doesn't put his head down and try to go to work. He's, in the triple threat position and kind of fakes as if he's going to do something and then passes it out. So it's just frustrating to think about things like that, and just to see that the Sixers weren't good enough, man. They just were not good enough. They're not a team that can lose any piece of this rotation and what Doc Rivers and the Sixers front office has put together and still expect to come out and win. Once Danny Green went down and Matisse Thybulle was in the lineup and the team saw that he wasn't going to be, making any of those open shots that he had, it hampered the Sixers. And of course, now you got to go to Furkan Korkmaz. Now you got to go to Shake Milton more than you wanted. And props to Shake for playing well in the second half when many people hadn't. But it's just not, they're not good enough. And they're not deep enough. They're not versatile enough. And it's something you said numerous times, that they don't have wings who can play both ends of the floor or enough of them. Maybe Tobias Harris fits that category, but there's not wings who can play both ends of the floor, like Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, Jimmy Butler, Giannis. They just don't have that, and um, it's going to be a weird off season because once again, like I said, the second round has gotten the best of the 76ers, and they don't have what they need. So fans have to endure another off season, training camp, and regular season to try to hope that this next upcoming playoffs is going to be the time where they finally kind of exercise these demons of not being good enough to reach the Eastern Conference Finals. Bro, once 2001, the only time since 1985 that they've been past the second round. That is unbelievable. And bro, you know how I ended the last podcast? I had hair the last time they were in the Eastern Conference Finals, bro. Like, come on.
It's if Embiid is not balling and James Harden is struggling, but mostly if Embiid is not balling, the Sixers' warts, their shortcomings are all on full display. You brought up my point from the last podcast, them not having two-way wings, the lack of creators, the lack of shooting. That was all on full display. And when you look for guys to go out there and get a shot, I mean, Tobias, when he scored 5 or 7 straight points at one point in the fourth quarter, it was like his first time scoring since the first quarter, I believe. And it's just James Harden didn't score a basket after the second quarter. He only took 2 shots in the second half. Therese Maxey, he continued to be aggressive and drive to the rack, shoot threes, but it's just not enough when you look at Furkan coming off the bench. Shake played his heart out, but like we thought Shake could be the Sixers six man, a someone like a Lou Williams or a Jordan Clarkson. Not saying that caliber, but a effective 6 man, and it doesn't seem like that's going to be his role with the Sixers. It definitely wasn't this season. Matisse Thybulle, I said it before, and I'll say it again. If you lock him in the gym overnight and tell him he can't dunk the ball, you'll show up tomorrow morning, he won't have 10 points. Get this kid a shooting coach. Like, has his shot improved since he's been in the league? And to think that he was untouchable in trade talks when you can't put him out there on the court at times just makes you rethink the whole Sixers, the front office, the brass on how they constructed this roster, because it's not. Embiid covers up so much. It's not a good roster, and it's just very frustrating year after year. And it's the same result, second round, get knocked out in the second round, a poor roster, Embiid carrying the load, and just shorten his career with the injuries.
Bro, I didn't expect that we would be here. I didn't expect that we would be finishing the season with this pod after Game 6. I thought they were forced a Game 7, and more and more just started to trend that way. And I can hear my dad now saying stuff like, they're wasting Embiid's prime, and that's the history of the 76ers. They never give their stars as much support as they need. And he's lecturing me about Charles Barkley and Allen Iverson and whatnot. But it's so true. It's so true that so many stars that have come through this town haven't gotten the support and the supporting cast that they need to succeed. But I'll say this, man. I don't know how much is going to change. I'm not sure if Doc Rivers, Stephen A. Smith on the broadcast before we came on to start the podcast was kind of alluding to what might happen in the offseason after he was hammering James Harden and calling him impotent and things like that about his performance. But he was speculating that something was in the air to him about Doc Rivers and what his future might hold here in Philadelphia. I know that I remember watching the broadcast, and there was a moment there, I believe it was maybe early fourth, where Doc was pleading with the team about the effort and going after it. And there's an opportunity here. You guys got to seize it and whatnot. And, I don't, why does he have to tell them that at that juncture of the game? Why does he have to implore them to play harder or to give maximum effort there at that juncture? So I didn't like hearing that. And I'm kind of in a bit of a whirlwind here, thinking about all that's gone on, and you mentioned Joel and shortening his career and playing with the injuries and whatnot. It's just weird. And also, I thought that it's something I felt when watching the game. And I don't want to start rambling, but Paul Reed and Joel on the floor together might work. And we've talked about that in the past. But when Danny Green went down, that's not a roster that they've explored in the past. So it could have been Danny Green once he left the floor. It was Matisse Thybulle. That's like the immediate, substitution. But it could have been Reed, Embiid, Harris, Harden, and Maxey. And I feel like I like that more than having Matisse out there. You know what I mean? And who knows if that would have even gotten them to the finish line with
I'm
the
okay
victory.
with
But
experimenting with that. Even though I don't love it, I'm okay with experimenting with it because since the Sixers haven't tried it, I've seen what happened when they put Tobias Harris at the 3, and it's just those
right.
players
but you're
are usually
desperate at
just
that
too
point.
fast.
Danny Green goes down.
Yeah, but I hear you got to try something new.
And you don't want Matisse out there, or you kind of
because you're playing 4-on-5 on
right.
the offensive end. And going back to what you said about Doc, and when they showed him in the timeout telling the guys to play with some effort, to fight for it.
Right.
The head coach shouldn't have to tell you that
it's
in the
painful,
playoffs.
Man.
Or it's just painful. It was like, and I'm glad the fans in the arena didn't hear that because they were already booing and they were already fed up. The ones that hadn't left at that point, because why sit in traffic when the guys you paid to see didn't show up? They were just there physically, but not in effort or spirit. It's frustrated. Like there's not. Last podcast, I said there's not an adult on the roster as a player to tell these guys to pick it up. And Game 5 being a letdown, I didn't love it, didn't like it. I didn't predict it, but I understand. 2 games back-to-back with that terrible effort, flat out unacceptable.
I think maybe they quit, man. That's what it seems like. And I hate to say it. Yeah, I don't know, man. I mean, you look at the second half effort, and so much has been made of, what happened last season and the way things ended and the Ben Simmons stuff. And he was definitely a great scapegoat for that. But it looks like the Sixers just ran out of gas this season and just didn't have that extra something where the Miami Heat did. And, they are the number 1 seed, but they beat the Sixers in a way where they wore them down and ground them down. It just was a way that it wasn't a pretty win. And you look at the type of basketball the Celtics and the Bucks are playing, and that's not the same kind of basketball that we're watching in this series. This was, both teams were under 100 points. You got a guy like Jimmy Butler who enjoys being the villain. You saw him waving goodbye to the Sixers, who half the fans had already left by that point. But it's painful to be a Sixers fan right now. You got Jimmy Butler, who used to be here back in the Eastern Conference Finals for the second time since leaving here.
Did you watch his post-game the post-game interview with George Sedano?
A little bit, yeah, a little bit, yeah.
He said he loved he just told Joel Embiid he loved him. He's proud of him. He wished he was still his teammate.
They chose the wrong guy. They chose the wrong
guys.
Who's the plural?
Brett Brown, Ben Simmons, and whoever told Jimmy Butler not to listen to other offers.
Right. So, and Joel, everybody else is like shaking hands and saying their farewells. He was still on the bench. It would look like the Heat players had to come over to where Joel was in order to get the, good game, sportsmanship, goodbyes, and things like that. He's wearing this. He's feeling it. I'm sure he's aching in more ways than one, physically, mentally, emotionally. We've seen him wear his emotions on his sleeve in the past. We saw him on the ground, writhing in pain, crying in Game 5. And he has to, welcome to Philly, Joel. Welcome to Philadelphia sports. Second year in a row, the home fans get to see their team eliminated. and nothing he can do about it. Not a thing at all.
Not a thing at all. And it's frustrating. The great year he had, and just to come up short, the injuries kick in at the worst possible time during the playoffs. It's never a good time to be injured, but for him to break an orbital bone, concussion, tore ligament in his thumb during the playoffs, all this happened. It stinks. They're just looking around like, guys, I'm out here. Can you a little bit more effort? Just show me you want it. Show
Right.
me you want it. It's man, it's hard
and
to be
and
a
and
fan
it's
at
it's
times.
easy, and the effort, and we're not talking about transition defense, which has been the issue for the team, which is also effort based, but it's really the second chance points. Sixers aren't getting any offensive rebounds. They're allowing the Heat second chance points. They're allowing a bunch of fast break points. Tobias Harris, of just to single him out, missing layups, and it just snowballed. It just was a cavalcade of miscues and missed opportunities and so many effort based things, like I mentioned, and it just can't happen that way. And you expect to win the basketball game. So I don't know what they're going to do to try to make it better, next season, but they can't come back with the roster like it is. Um, I had heard that part of the reason why Matisse Thybulle wasn't included in the trade when Ben Simmons got sent away is that
Don't even matter.
the Nets didn't want two players who were unvaccinated,
No.
with which Kyrie Irving and Matisse Thybulle would have been, and the restrictions were different at that time. So
No.
it's just you long for what could be the next a step for this team, but what you have to do is face the reality of them not being good enough, and that's going to take a few days for this team to process and understand,
I want to
or
go
or
back to
team
the
or fan base.
I want to go back to the effort plays you just mentioned.
Mhm.
At one point, Jimmy Butler pulled up a jump shot at the end of the clock, missed it. He got his own rebound in the corner. The fans started booing. Then no one gets out there to defend, and he pulls up a three pointer in the corner, nothing but net. Yeah, the effort, transition defense, like it was bad at times, but plays like that, James Harden coming down court, dribbled, pounding the ball into the ground, almost get his pockets picked because there's three defenders in front of him, pulls it back out, comes back up, dribbles again, gets his pocket picked. It's going the other way. And he just looks at the ref trying to get a call. Like, no, go run back on defense. The effort was, can't even stress it enough, man. I said that this performance was unacceptable, and I don't want to sound like a broken record, but the effort wasn't there. And like he have guys out there that undrafted guys, and it's just outworking some of these max players the Sixers have, whether it's Gabe Vincent, Struess. Like they wanted it.
Yeah, it's upsetting because you could see the path that the Sixers could take to win the basketball game or just win the series, and it just is disappointing because you know as a fan base you're staring and like wondering what's going through these guys' heads and how they're out there performing the way they are, but um and you think about Harden and the way he tends to linger in the backcourt and when he doesn't get a call, and I think some of those body language and things like that can be overblown, but some of those things are important and leadership and leading by example and things like that, and it just feels like one of those times where you know it doesn't feel like a play or two could have gone their way that would have changed the tide. It's more or less like their attitude and approach and how they come into the game. And part of that facing elimination is you're a little tight, probably. You're a little, apprehensive about how things are going to go. But there was no one play that kind of loosened everything up. There was no moment or two. They start the game and they're down 7-0. Then they got to fight back and they go on their own 7-0 run. but there was no play or two where Harden hits a big three and he's screaming going down the court like we've seen, or Maxey falls into the stands and is like egging the crowd on, or Joel Embiid thrust the process or whatever. There was no moment like that. They were tight from the beginning. They played tight and they lost. So it's really nothing else to say. But
did James Harden box anybody out tonight?
Oh, come on. That's not in his wheelhouse. That's not in his wheelhouse. No one does that anymore.
He didn't box anybody out. Jimmy Butler looks like a infinitely better player than him. At times, Victor Oladipo looked like a better player than him out there on the court. Man.
You could probably line up a few more guys, too.
Yeah. Strus,
Tyler Hero.
Vincent, Tyler Hero. I don't even think Tyler Hero did anything too amazing in this game. That's how bad the effort was. 6 man a year. It's not like he went off.
He alley-ooped off the glass to Bam Adebayo, who barely got the ball, but it still went in the rim, So it's just the Sixers really have to look in the mirror, and they give a lackluster effort in Game 5, lose by 35 points, come home and embarrass the fans and themselves as well. It's tough to stomach. It's tough to talk about. So I hope everyone figures out their own way to process this and overcome it. I'm sure a lot will come out as these exit interviews and things happen, and the post-game press conferences, and we get the extent of Embiid's thumb injury and how long he'll be out and things like that. But it's difficult to stomach right now, and we appreciate everyone who's been with us every step of the way here on the Sixers Talk podcast. Final thought, Ben, before we get out of here?
It's another disappointing year. I think it's unfortunate, man. Don't want to say a loss for words. It's just
I blame Siakam.
Sick. I blame Pascal Siakam.
Yeah.
I blame a lot of people before I get to him, and they all get a check from the Philadelphia 76ers.
Lord have mercy. I guess they'll have to figure it out. Not much else to say. We appreciate you listening. This has been an instant reaction podcast after Game 6. The Sixers season is over. 99-90, they lose to the Miami Heat, who are going to the Eastern Conference Finals for the second time in 3 years. For Ben Berry, I'm Danny Pommells. We'll see you next time on the Sixers Talk podcast. We're brought to you by Wilmington University, Wilmview Work.